The morning started like every other morning at Crestfield General Hospital. Cold floors, fluorescent lights humming overhead, the sharp, clean bite of antiseptic floating through the air like a quiet warning. Nurse Elena Vasquez arrived at 6:47 a.m. She was 34 years old, medium height, dark hair pulled back tight. Her scrubs were pressed. Her badge was clipped straight. She carried a small thermos of black coffee and said good morning to the security guard at the front desk without slowing her step. Nobody paid much attention to Elena. That was the way she preferred it. She had worked at Crestfield for 2 years, long enough to know every supply closet, every back stairwell, every broken ceiling tile on the 3rd floor. She knew which vending machine gave you 2 bags of chips if you pressed B4 twice. She knew which orderly was secretly applying to medical school and which attending physician was quietly afraid of needles. She noticed everything. She said nothing. Her supervisor, Dr. Harlan Briggs, called her reliable. He meant it as a compliment. To Dr. Briggs, reliable meant quiet. It meant obedient. It meant she would follow his instructions without asking questions and stay in her lane without making noise. Dr. Briggs was a tall man with silver hair and loud opinions. He had trained at Johns Hopkins. He reminded people of this often. He had never once asked Elena where she trained. She had never volunteered. The information. On this particular Tuesday morning, Elena clocked in, checked the patient board, and took a slow walk through Ward C. She had a habit of doing that, walking the ward before the day officially began, checking on people, adjusting a pillow here, noting a change in someone's color there. Room 14 held an elderly man named Mr. Calloway, 71 years old, recovering from a hip replacement. He was awake when Elena pushed open the door, staring at the ceiling with the particular expression of a man who had too much time to think. "You're early," he said. "I'm always early," she said. She checked his vitals. Everything looked normal. She adjusted his blanket and moved toward the door. "Nurse Vasquez," he said quietly. She stopped. "Something feels wrong today." He wasn't talking about his hip. She could hear that clearly. There was something careful in his voice, something measured. She turned back and looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were sharp, sharper than they should have been for a man recovering from surgery. His hands, resting on the blanket, were still in a way that came from training, not rest. She gave him a small nod, one that said, "I hear you." She left the room and stood in the hallway. For a moment, the fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opened. Heavy footsteps. 2 sets. Maybe 3. Elena tilted her head slightly and listened. Those were not hospital shoes. Those were boots. Her coffee had gone cold in her hand. She set it quietly on the nurse's station counter and straightened her badge. She had heard footsteps like those before, in very different places, and whenever they appeared, it never meant anything good. 3 men walked into Crestfield General like they owned it. Black tactical gear. No visible insignia. Earpieces curled behind their right ears. Their boots struck the linoleum with a heavy, deliberate rhythm that did not belong in a place built for healing. The man in front was broad-shouldered and pale. He had a jaw like a concrete block and eyes that scanned the room the way cameras scan a parking lot, sweeping. Mechanical, missing nothing. Not or so he thought. He handed a document to the front desk receptionist. She read it. Her face changed. She picked up the phone. Elena watched all of this from the supply corridor just beyond Ward C. She had not moved toward them. She had not moved away. She simply stood where the angle gave her a clean sightline and waited. Within 90 seconds, Dr. Harlan Briggs appeared from his office. His white coat flapped as he walked. He was trying to look authoritative. He looked nervous instead. "Gentlemen," he said, extending a hand. "I'm the chief of medicine. What is this about?" The broad-shouldered man did not take his hand. He said 2 words, quietly. Alina was too far to hear them clearly. But she read his lips without thinking, the skill surfacing automatically. The way breathing surfaces when you stop thinking about it. Federal Operation Dr. Briggs straightened. Whatever color lived in his face drained south. The 3 men were escorted toward the East Wing. The restricted corridor, the one that connected to the private recovery suites used for government contracts. Alina already knew what was in the East Wing. Room 9. A patient admitted 3 days ago under a false name. Vitals listed as stable. No visitors logged. 2 plainclothed men rotating outside, door in 6-hour shifts. She had noticed them on her second day. She had said nothing. She finished her rounds. She administered medication. She smiled at a woman in room 7 who was finally breathing without assistance. She replaced an IV bag with steady hands, and she thought. 20 minutes later, the hospital intercom crackled. Code yellow. East Wing. All non-essential personnel, please clear the corridor. Code yellow meant a security situation, not a medical emergency. A security one. The nurses around her exchanged wide eyes. A young aide named Priya grabbed Elena's sleeve. "What does that mean? Should we leave?" "No," Alina said calmly. "Stay at your stations. Keep your patients calm." Priya nodded, like Alina had given her something solid to hold on to. Alina walked to the nurses' station and pulled up the East Wing monitor on the secondary screen. Standard procedure charge nurses were permitted to view corridor feeds during Code Yellow. Room 9's door was open. The 2 plainclothed guards were inside. The 3 tactical men were inside. Dr. Briggs hovered in the doorway, looking like a man who had wandered into a situation several sizes too large for him. The patient in room 9 was a man in his mid-50s, gray at the temples. A surgical bandage wrapped his left shoulder. His face was tight with pain. He was working hard not to show. Alina studied his monitor. Numbers on the feed. His blood pressure had spiked. Heart rate was elevated. Not from fear, from something physical. Something was wrong with him medically. And the men in that room were not looking at his chart. They were talking at him. 2 of them standing over him. With the posture of interrogation rather than care. Elena's jaw tightened. She looked at the corridor clock. She looked back at the screen. The patient's monitor line flickered. She was already moving before. She made the conscious decision to move. Badge in hand. Shoes silent on the floor. She turned the corner into the East Wing with the calm expression of a woman who had simply come to check on a patient, because that was exactly what she was doing. The broad-shouldered man stepped into her path. "This area is restricted," he said. Alina looked at his chest. No badge. No hospital credentials. No medical identification of any kind. She looked up at his face. "That man's pressure is crashing," she said. Simple, flat, certain. "Ma'am, step aside," she said. Her voice did not rise. It did not waver. It carried the specific, quiet weight of a person who was not asking. The man hesitated, just for a second. Something in her tone confused him. It did not match the white scrubs. It did not match the soft hallway lighting. She walked past him. Dr. Briggs blinked. "Vasquez, this isn't." She was already at the bedside. Her hands moved. She came to check on a patient. But what she found in that room would change everything. Part 3 continues, and she is just getting started. Part 2 is coming, and the danger is already inside the building. Her hands moved with a speed and precision that did not belong in an ordinary Tuesday morning. She pressed 2 fingers to the patient's neck, counted checked the foreline, checked the surgical site beneath the bandage without asking anyone's permission. She noted the slight discoloration at the edge of the wound. She noted the temperature of his skin against her fingers. Internal bleeding. Early stage, but moving, she straightened up and turned to the room. I need a crash cart on standby. I need a surgeon page Dr. Renata Kim, not Briggs. And I need everyone without medical clearance to step back against the wall. Now, the room went very still. Dr. Briggs opened his mouth. Now, she said again. The same quiet voice. The same absolute certainty. The broad-shouldered man looked at the patient. Looked at Alina. Something shifted in his assessment of the situation. He stepped back. His two colleagues followed Dr. Briggs. To his credit, picked up the room phone. Alina worked. She adjusted the IV flow. She elevated the patient's legs with practiced efficiency. She spoke to him in a low, steady voice, not to comfort him the way you comfort a frightened person, but the way you talk to someone who understands exactly what is happening and needs to know they are in capable hands. You've got some bleeding at the site, she said quietly. We're managing it. Stay still. The man's gray eyes found hers. He was not afraid. He was measuring her. How long have you known? He asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. Since this morning, she said. I saw the pressure shift on the monitor. Your body's been compensating for a few hours. He almost smiled. Not what I meant. She glanced at him, then looked back at the foreline. Stay still, she said again. Dr. Renata Kim arrived in 4 minutes. She was a small woman with quick eyes and no patience for chaos. She assessed the situation in 30 seconds, confirmed Alina's read completely, and began issuing her own orders. Briggs stood in the corner and watched. The 3 tactical men stood along the wall. The broad-shouldered one kept his eyes on Alina, not threatening, something more unsettling than that. Studying the patient was stabilized within 12 minutes. A surgical team was prepped for a procedure that would take less than an hour. Dr. Kim handled the paperwork. Alina stepped back from the bed and stripped her gloves. Dr. Briggs found his voice again. Vasquez. He came toward her with the expression of a man who had been embarrassed in front of guests. You walked into a federal operation without authorization. You gave orders in my hospital. His pressure was at 80/50, she said. She was writing in the patient chart as she spoke. He would have coded within the hour. That is not the point, isn't it? She looked up at him briefly. No hostility. No apology. Just a woman who found it genuinely difficult to understand how that was not the point. Briggs's face reddened. We will discuss your conduct this afternoon. My office. 4 o'clock. She nodded and walked out of the room. In the corridor, she stopped at the nurse's station. Young Priya was watching her with wide eyes. A few other staff members had drifted near, drawn by the tension like moths to a lit window. The code yellow is resolved, Alina said normally. Let's get back to rounds. Mrs. O'Coffer in room 12 is due for her noon check. They scattered back to work. Alina lifted her thermos. She had picked it up again at some point. Without thinking, and took a slow sip of cold coffee. The broad-shouldered man had followed her into the corridor. He stood a few feet away, not blocking her, just present. That was good work, he said. She said nothing. I'm Agent Cole, Federal Protective Services. He paused. You're not just a nurse? It was not a question. Alina capped her thermos. I'm exactly a nurse, she said. I'm just also very good at it. She walked back toward Ward C. She did not look back, but she heard him stand there for a long moment before his boots finally moved in the other direction. Outside, 2 black SUVs had appeared in the hospital parking lot. Then a third. Alina passed a window and saw them. She saw the figures moving around the vehicles. She saw the cordon forming at the entrance. The hospital was being locked down. She had expected this. Not the specifics, but the shape of it. She had walked into something larger than one bleeding man in a private room. She had known that the moment she saw the first set of boots. The question was no longer whether she was involved. She already was. The question was how much longer she could remain just a nurse. By 2 in the afternoon, Crestfield General was sealed. Security personnel at every exit. Plainclothes agents in the lobby. The parking lot had become a staging area. SUVs, a mobile command unit, and 2 vehicles with federal plates that no one was allowed close enough to read clearly. The staff moved through their shifts with that particular tension that comes from not knowing what exactly is wrong, but knowing something very much is. Patients asked questions. Nurses answered with calm half-truths. The cafeteria stayed open. The intercom kept its regular cycle. On the surface, Crestfield functioned. Beneath the surface, it held its breath. Alina moved through her afternoon rounds like nothing had changed. She checked vital signs. She updated charts. She sat for 6 minutes with a 9-year-old girl named Maya, who was afraid of the dark and whose parents had been stuck outside the lockdown perimeter since noon. Alina did not promise the lockdown would end soon. She promised Maya that the dark was the same dark as always, and that some things do not change just because the situation outside the window does. Maya seemed to find that useful. Alina found it true. At 2:40 p.m., Agent Cole reappeared. He found her in the medication room, cataloging a supply count with the kind of focused attention most people reserved for urgent things. "We have a problem," he said. She did not look up. "We have several." He came further into the room and lowered his voice. "The man in room 9. His name is Lawrence Holt. He was extracted from a compromised operation 4 days ago. Someone inside this hospital has been communicating his location to the other side." Alina set down her clipboard. She looked at Cole. "How long have you known there was an inside source?" "Since this morning. And you brought 3 tactical agents into the building in plain sight." Her voice was neutral, not accusatory. The way a person states weather conditions, Cole had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We were attempting to move him before it escalated. Instead, you advertised exactly where he was." She picked up her clipboard again. "How many people have access to the East Wing?" "We're working through the list. I can narrow it for you." She turned and walked to the door. "Follow me. Stay quiet." He followed her. He was beginning to understand that when Alina Vasquez said something in that voice, "You did it first and processed it later." She led him to the secondary nursing station on the East Wing. She pulled up an access log on the terminal, the digital record of who had badged into which rooms. Over the past 72 hours, she pointed. This employee badged into the East Wing corridor 3 times in the past 2 days, non-assigned, no documented reason. Each time within 20 minutes of a scheduled medication round, when staff movement is highest and least notable. She tapped the screen. "His name is Derek Paulson. He works biomedical maintenance. His badge should never clear the East Wing door." Cole stared at the screen. Then at her. "Ow. I noticed the access log 2 days ago. I flagged it internally." She met his eyes. No one followed up. Cole pulled out his phone and stepped away. She heard him speaking low and fast. She walked back to her rounds at 3:15 p.m. 2 agents quietly intercepted Derek Paulson in the basement. There was no scene, no noise. The hospital continued to breathe. At 3:45 p.m., 15 minutes before her scheduled meeting with Dr. Briggs, a new alert moved through the building. Not an intercom announcement, a physical one. Agents moving quickly through the corridors. Whispered radio traffic. The energy shifting from tense to urgent. Alina was in the stairwell between floors 2 and 3 when she heard it. A sound from above, 1 floor up. The sound of something striking metal, followed by rapid footsteps, followed by a door slamming that she was already climbing. 3rd floor, the pediatric wing. She pushed through the door and saw it immediately, a man at the far end of the corridor, moving fast, a bag over one shoulder, heading for the emergency exit. He passed a wall of room windows. Children's drawings taped to the glass in bright, crooked colors. He was not hospital staff. She recognized the body language. The specific way a person moves when they are leaving a place they were never supposed to enter. Alina did not shout. She did not run. She moved 15 feet. 10, 5. She caught his wrist as he hit the exit bar. He spun, tried to pull free. She redirected his momentum with a motion that was clean, controlled and completely invisible beneath her white scrubs. He went down hard against the wall. She had his arm pinned before he finished sliding. "Don't," she said quietly. He looked up at her, confused, furious, looking at her white uniform and her calm face and not understanding. What had just happened to him? Agents poured through the door. 20 seconds later, Cole was among them. He looked at the man on the floor. He looked at Alina standing over him, breathing normally. Adjusting the hem of her scrub top, he said nothing for a moment. Then, Vasquez. "There's a bag," she said. He was carrying documents. "You'll want to check the contents before anyone else touches it." She stepped back, folded her hands in front of her, looked like a nurse again. Cole watched her. The expression on his face had moved past confusion into something that looked a great deal like recognition. "Who are you?" he said. She looked at the clock on the corridor wall. "I have a meeting with Dr. Briggs in 14 minutes, she said. "I'll be late if I miss it. He hates that." She walked away. Behind her, the agents processed the scene. The man on the floor was cuffed. The bag was secured. Cole stood still for a long moment. Then he made a phone call, a different kind of phone call than before. The meeting with Dr. Briggs lasted 9 minutes. He sat behind his large desk with the particular posture of a man who had prepared a speech. Photographs on the wall. Diplomas framed in dark wood. The faint smell of coffee and self-importance. He spoke about protocol, about chain of command, about the importance of staff understanding their role within the institutional structure of Crestfield General Hospital. Alina sat across from him with her hands in her lap and her expression politely attentive. When he finished, she said, "Is that everything?" Briggs blinked. He had expected pushback or apology. The absence of both disrupted something in his rhythm. "I'll be filing a formal incident report. Your conduct today saved a patient's life," she said, "was outside the scope of your position." She nodded slowly, as though considering whether that was actually true. "I stabilized a man in internal hemorrhagic distress using Salacey for pressure management and positional adjustment. Dr. Kim confirmed the assessment and completed the procedure. Everything I did fell within nursing scope and emergency protocol." She paused. "But I understand the report." Briggs stared at her. Something in the conversation had slipped out from under him, and he was not entirely sure when. "You're dismissed," he said. She stood, thanked him, and left in the corridor outside his office. She allowed herself one slow breath. Then she kept moving. At 4:30 p.m., the hospital was still locked. The 3rd floor was still restricted. Lawrence Holt, the patient from room 9, had been moved to a more secure location within the building. The man Alina had apprehended in the pediatric wing was in federal custody somewhere below ground level. The afternoon light had turned the color of old gold. Through the high windows, Alina was in the break room, alone. She had eaten half a sandwich without tasting it. She was rewriting a patient care note by hand, the scratch of her pen steady and even. When Agent Cole came through the door, he poured himself a coffee, sat down across from her, did not speak for a moment. The documents in the bag, he said finally. They were extraction routes. For Holt, if our suspect had gotten them out, Holt would have been dead before morning. Alina kept writing. The operation Holt was embedded in, Cole continued, ran for 3 years. Deep cover. Medical infrastructure. Which is probably why someone placed him in a hospital for recovery. He paused. Someone who knew the environment. Someone who understood that federal protection in a civilian medical facility has blind spots. She capped her pen. Whoever arranged his placement here, Cole said carefully, knew this hospital's layout very well. Its access points, its staff rotations. He looked at her, almost like someone had been studying it for 2 years. Alina looked back at him. Are you asking me something, Agent Cole? He chose his next words deliberately. I made some calls this afternoon. After the stairwell, he set his coffee down. The people I spoke to told me to stand down, to render full cooperation to the primary and step back. He paused. I've been doing this work for 11 years. I have never been told to stand down mid-operation. The break room was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the parking lot lights had come on against the fading afternoon. They also told me, Cole said, that the nurse on staff at this facility is not just a nurse, and that I should be grateful she was here today. Alina was quiet for a moment. They used the word grateful, she said. They used a different word, he said, but the meaning was the same. She picked up her pen again, looked at her notes, then set it down. Lawrence Holt recruited me, she said. Her voice was quiet, matter of fact, the way you say something that has been true for a long time. 14 years ago, I was a combat medic attached to a joint task force operating in a zone I am not going to name. He was the commanding officer overseeing the intelligence component of that operation. She looked at the wall for a moment. He saw something in the field one day that he said he had never seen before. A medic making tactical decisions under fire that saved 9 lives, including his. She was quiet. After I left service, she said, I went back to nursing. I built a life that looked exactly like what it looks like. Because the best cover is a life that's actually true. She looked at Cole. I was placed here because someone identified a threat to Holt's recovery location 6 weeks ago. I was the best option to provide close protection without drawing attention. Cole absorbed this, and nobody told me, he said. Nobody was supposed to tell you, she said. If you'd known, you would have treated me differently. People who are treated differently start standing out. He was quiet. The file they have on you, she said, must be a good one. Or they wouldn't have let me tell you this now. He looked at her for a long time. What happens next? He said. She stood up, folded her sandwich wrapper, picked up her pen and her notes. I go finish my shift, she said. I have 3 patients due 4 evening vitals, a medication review at 6, meant a 9-year-old girl who is scared of the dark and needs someone to check on her before lights out. She looked at him simply. And then tomorrow, I come back. And I'm a nurse. She walked out of the break room. Cole sat alone with his cold coffee for a long moment. Somewhere above him, on a floor he was no longer responsible for securing. A man who had been at the center of a federal operation for 3 years was alive because a woman in white scrubs had noticed a number on a monitor and walked through a door she had every right to walk through. Cole shook his head. Slowly, he thought he had seen everything in 11 years. He had been wrong. Outside, a 4th black vehicle had appeared in the parking lot. This one was different from the others. The plates were different. The markings were different, and the figure stepping out of the back was not an agent. The evening shift settled over Crestfield General like a second skin, quieter than day, slower. The corridors dimmed to half-light, and the sounds of the building changed, monitors beeping in steady rhythms, the distant murmur of televisions in patient rooms, the soft drag of rubber-soled shoes on clean floors. Alina finished her medication. Review at 6:12 p.m. She checked on Maya. In the pediatric ward at 6:30, the girl was sitting up in bed, drawing a horse on the back of a hospital menu. Alina sat with her for 4 minutes. They talked about horses, then about whether clouds had feelings, then about nothing in particular. When Alina left, Maya was smiling. It was, Alina thought, one of the best 4 minutes of the day. She was writing her end-of-shift notes at the main station when she heard it. The lobby at me. A different kind of quiet had settled over the front of the building. Not the quiet of routine. The quiet that falls when people instinctively stop moving. She looked up through the long window at the end of the corridor. She could see the lobby entrance. She could see the staff there, the receptionist, 2 orderlies, a young resident, all still, all looking toward the door. And then the door opened. He was not tall. That was the first thing people always noted about General Marcus Webb. He was a compact man in his early 60s with iron gray hair cut close and a face that had been weathered into something like carved stone. He wore his dress uniform, full insignia, the kind worn for occasions that matter. He walked through the lobby like a man who had walked through difficult rooms his entire life and found each one smaller than the last dot. Behind him were 2 aides. Behind them was a woman in a dark suit whom Alina recognized, even from this distance. As a federal official of considerable rank, Dr. Briggs appeared from somewhere. He extended his hand again, with the same hopeful authority he had shown the tactical agents that morning. General Webb shook it briefly. Then he looked past him. "Where is she?" he said. Briggs blinked. "I'm sorry." "Vasquez," Webb said. "Where is Nurse Vasquez?" Briggs's mouth opened, then closed at the nurse's station. Alina set down her pen. She took a slow breath. She stood up and walked toward the lobby. The corridor felt longer than it ever had. The fluorescent lights above her were the same lights as always. The smell of antiseptic was the same. The sound of monitors in the distance was the same. Everything was exactly the same and completely different. She turned the corner into the lobby. General Webb saw her immediately. He walked toward her. His aide stepped back. The woman in the dark suit stepped back. Briggs, who had been trailing at Webb's shoulder with the confused expression of a man watching a film in a language he doesn't speak, stepped back to Webb, stopped in front of Alina. He was perhaps 3 inches taller than her. He looked at her face for a moment with an expression that was not quite pride and not quite relief, but something that held pieces of both. Then he raised his right hand. He saluted her, clean, precise, full. Military. The lobby went completely silent. Alina held it for exactly the right amount of time. Then she returned it. The motion automatic, correct, carrying in it 14 years of something that did not go away just because you folded it under white. Scrubs. Webb lowered his hand. "You saved Lawrence's life today," he said, quietly, just between them. "Saved a patient," she said. "That's what I do." Something moved across his face. "Yes," he said. "It is." He reached into his jacket and removed a small folded document. He held it out to her without explanation. She knew what it was before she opened it. She opened it anyway. Transfer orders, signed and authorized, returning her from extended deep cover status to active operational command. Effective immediately. She read it. She folded it carefully, set it in her pocket. Webb looked at her for a long moment. "The operation is done. Holt is secure." The source has been neutralized. What you did today, he paused. We'll discuss the full briefing tomorrow. She nodded once. Behind him, Dr. Briggs had been standing very still for a very long time. He was a man who prided himself on reading rooms, on understanding hierarchies. He had built his entire career on knowing, at any given moment, who was the most important person in it. He was understanding now that he had been wrong for 2 years. His face had done something complicated. It had passed through confusion, then through a kind of dawning that looked almost painful, and arrived somewhere that resembled the expression of a man who has just replayed every interaction in a relationship and found himself on the wrong side of all of them. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. Cole was standing near the entrance. He watched Alina and the general. He watched Briggs. He watched the woman in the dark suit, who was now speaking quietly with Webb's aide. Cole looked at Alina. One more time, she caught his eye across the lobby. He gave her a small nod, the kind that says, I understand now. And I am glad it was you. She acknowledged it. Then she looked away. General, she said, I have 2 more patients to check before I hand off to night shift. Webb blinked. Then he almost smiled. Almost, of course. She excused herself. She turned back toward the ward. She passed the nurse's station, picked up her pen, and finished her end of shift notes with the same careful hand as always. Priya appeared at her elbow, young, bright-eyed, still a little shaken from the day. Is everything okay? Who was that man? Why did she paused. Did he just salute you? Alina looked at her notes. Mrs. O'Coffer's 6 o'clock reading was slightly elevated, she said. Make sure the night nurse knows to check again at 9. Priya stared at her dot. Alina capped her pen and clipped it to her pocket. Go home safe tonight, she said. You did good work today. She picked up her thermos and walked to the last 2 rooms. She checked vitals. She adjusted a pillow. She turned off a bathroom light someone had left on, and she thought about what came next. The orders in her pocket were real. Tomorrow, something would change. The white scrubs would go back into a drawer. A different kind of work would begin again. The kind she had set aside, not because she stopped believing in it, but because there are many ways to serve. Healing was one of them. She had never stopped. Knowing that she finished her shift at 7:04 p.m., she signed the handoff form. She said goodnight to the night charge nurse. She collected her thermos and her bag from her locker and walked down the back stairwell to the parking lot. The black vehicles were still there. She walked past them. The night air was cold and clean. No antiseptic, no fluorescent hum. Just the quiet, dark, and the distant sound of the city moving through its ordinary life. She stopped for a moment. Looked up. The stars were there. Faint above the light pollution, but there. She had noticed them here before. On other late nights, walking to her car, being only what she appeared to be. She stood for a moment with the weight of the day behind her, and the orders in her pocket, and the quiet certainty that whatever came next, she would meet it the same way she met everything, calmly, precisely, without asking for credit she was never there to receive. She got in her car and drove home through streets that did not know her. Name they never did. That was the whole point